if you're going to be that kind of wife. Maybe you should just leave." I sat there stunned by my mother-in-law's harsh words. Her cold, intense gaze bore into me. "Francisco has us, and we don't need you anymore. You always look tired and seem to accomplish nothing," chimed in my unhelpful sister-in-law with a dismissive tone. "This is too much, Francisco. Don't you think your mother and sister are going overboard?" I pleaded. "I'm doing my best." When I sought help from my husband, he responded with a demeaning attitude. "I agree with my mother and sister," Francisco interjected. "I'm busy with work, and it's becoming a problem if you don't help with the chores. Besides, my relationship with the new part-time girl is progressing, and you're just baggage. Can you quickly pack and live somewhere else?" Shocked by Francisco's words, I glanced at the three of them. They all seemed to blame me. A surge of rage welled up in my chest. I took a deep breath, calmed myself, and said, "I understand. I need some time." My in-laws, who had once relied on me, were now falling apart. "My name is Michelle, and I'm 32 years old. I work diligently both at my job and in household chores. While it's not uncommon for women to continue working after marriage, I truly love my job and strive to succeed in the company I joined right after college." One morning, as I was getting ready for work, my husband Francisco approached with a pleading look. "Michelle, can you take care of this?" He handed me a file crammed with receipts and bills. "You should manage the cafe's finances properly." I smiled and responded, "Sorry, but I'm really bad at that." I met Francisco while he was working part-time at a cafe I frequented. After a few chats, we began dating and eventually talked about marriage. Now, Francisco owns the cafe, but despite his ability to run the business, he struggles with paperwork and always asks me to handle the accounting. As I sighed, my mother-in-law added, "Michelle, I suddenly feel like eating Chinese food tonight. Could you rinse the rice well? Also, Mia and the kids are coming this weekend, so we need to plan their meals." "Sure, I got it." I nodded to my mother-in-law's request and hurriedly left the house. Before marriage, I was excited about my new life with Francisco. However, he suggested, "My mom's lonely by herself. Why don't we all live together in our big house?" So now I reside with his mother. To put it lightly, she's not proficient in household chores. When we moved in, the house was a bit of a mess after my father-in-law passed away. She started living on a pension, which she mostly spends on dining out or ordering food. Francisco seems to believe that housework is a woman's job, making it my full responsibility. Francisco's sister Mia occasionally brings her kids home, and each time she does, my to-do list grows. I can't help but think that yet another chaotic weekend is approaching. Weekends, which should be precious times for recovering from the usual exhaustion, turn into moments where my sister-in-law's children ask to play or complain about being hungry. I find myself not only preparing meals in the kitchen but also entertaining the children. Then my sister-in-law drops a bombshell. "Michelle, I'm getting divorced and will be moving back here with the kids next month." I'm surprised, and for a moment I'm lost for words. "Really? Do you have something to say?" she asks. "No, I was just thinking. When are you moving?" I inquire. "I want to move as soon as possible." Surprised that my sister-in-law and her children will be moving in, I hope that maybe she will help, and household chores will become more manageable. While we had a normal relationship, I anticipate that this change might bring us closer and result in her contributing to the chores. Despite my positive attitude, reality has other plans. Perhaps because she grew up with my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law appears to live life devoid of housework. She spends most of her time lounging on the sofa, watching TV, and always has some snack with her. Observing her, I realize her neglect of housework might have contributed to her divorce. Now, with the added responsibility of preparing meals for her children and making lunches for kindergarten, my workload increases and my free time diminishes. I had hoped for her assistance, but it's disappointing that it turns out to be a swing and a miss. Then there comes a time when my work at the company suddenly becomes hectic. Every day I start work early, do overtime, and return home exhausted to find the room overflowing with things, with no space to even walk. Seeing this scene each day, waves of fatigue wash over me. On top of that, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law complain, asking if dinner is ready yet or why I'm home so late when I struggle to manage household chores. They coldly remark, "Michelle, there's a mountain of laundry waiting. Don't slack off just because you're busy." I internally protest, "Mother-in-law, I'm really trying my best." But before my sister-in-law can say anything, I frequently opt to keep my thoughts to myself. "Michelle, are you standing up to your mother-in-law? That's a bit bold, but for the sake of the children, please try a little harder to make homemade meals," suggested my sister-in-law. I couldn't help but respond, "If you have so much free time at home, why don't you help out once in a while?" While doing household chores, I overheard Francisco's sister saying, "Haha, Francisco owns a store, so Michelle doesn't need to work, right? If that's the case, maybe you should try a little harder at home." Behind their words, I felt the mounting pressure that I should be doing more. That night, at the peak of my stress, I decided to speak my mind to friend Isco. "I've been so busy lately, and neither your mother nor your sister is helping out with household chores. It's really hard," I confessed. "Michelle, you're not speaking ill of our family, are you?" Francisco's eyes sharpened a bit, and I braced myself. "That's not what I mean, but it's hard for me to do everything by myself. If you helped out once in a while, things would be a little easier for me," I explained. "I'm busy managing the store. It's different from a regular job. Housework is the wife's responsibility, right?" Even though disappointed by his response, I sat and pondered. A good idea suddenly popped into my head, and I silently pumped my fist. I immediately grabbed my smartphone, opened my favorite online shop, and started adding necessary items to the cart. After completing the purchase, I went to bed satisfied. A few days later, my new electronic household appliances, which would become my lifelines, were delivered to our home. The latest washing machine, a cleaning robot that reaches every corner of the room, and a rice cooker that cooks delicious rice without much effort. Each of them was a savior, making my daily life just a little bit easier and more enjoyable. While setting up the new washing machine, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law suddenly appeared with surprised expressions. "Why, Michelle, you got such a fancy washing machine. But the old one was still good, wasn't it?" Smiling gently, I replied, "The old one took a bit too long, and I heard this new one shortens the laundry time." Their gaze then shifted to the cleaning robot and the new kitchen appliances. "See, I've also upgraded these," I said, showing them off a bit. "All these things, clean robots and convenient cooking appliances. Michelle, come over here for a moment," my mother-in-law said, inviting me inside the room. Seeing the slightly surprised expressions of my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, I smirked to myself. Francisco sat next to me, and the four of us began our discussion. "Why did you buy so many things?" My mother-in-law raised her voice. "Do you really need all these new appliances? Isn't it just because you want to make things a bit easier?" She continued, "Well, I thought it would be nice if things around the house could run a bit more smoothly." I replied with a slightly troubled expression. My mother-in-law chimed in, "Relying too much on machines, aren't we?" The sister-in-law waved her hand, but I responded, "The appliances we had can still be used." "Francisco is working hard managing his store. Maybe you should be more frugal." Francisco nodded in agreement with his sister, and in a quiet voice, I murmured, "Maybe you're right." There was a hint of anger in my mother-in-law's eyes, and I stumbled over my words. "Are you even considering our household?" "I really am, but I'm just a bit exhausted," I replied. My mother-in-law raised her voice, exclaiming, "Enough. I can't believe you're our daughter-in-law." My sister-in-law, with a disgusted look, added, "I'll watch over Francisco. We don't need someone like you here." When I looked at Francisco, he said coldly, "I understand what Mom and Sis are saying. It's a bit difficult to have a wife who doesn't do housework." Looking at Francisco's face, my heart felt heavy. He continued with a cold smile, "I have my own store, so I decide how to use my money. But being with someone who spends on anything and everything might be difficult." I was shaken by his words, but I looked into Francisco's eyes and counted to 10. He added with a hint of cruelty, "Also, I've noticed things have been going well with that new part-time girl. She's more attractive than you are now. Maybe it's time for you to pack up and find a new place to live." A fire of anger surged within me, though I didn't voice it. Taking a step back and calming myself, I replied after a deep breath, "All right, I'll look for a new home that's better." "Finally, you understand. I'll feel much better without you around," he said smugly. Francisco signed the divorce papers that night, and I moved to a nearby weekly rental apartment with just the bare essentials and the divorce paper. No one tried to stop me when I left. Did they ever really care about me? After submitting the divorce papers at the city office, I found a stylish apartment to start fresh. During this time, an unexpected opportunity came my way, a promotion I had been putting off because of my family situation. I seized this chance and began working as a section manager. Every day, as I dedicated myself entirely to my job, I felt a renewed sense of accomplishment. In the midst of these busy days, my phone rang. The caller ID showed it was my former mother-in-law. I thought we had nothing to do with each other anymore, right? Without checking her message, I swiped to dismiss the call. My new life had begun, and I wouldn't look back at the past. A year flew by. One weekend, as I was relaxing in my room, listening to my favorite music, my phone rang again. To my surprise, it was my former mother-in-law. Wondering what she wanted after all this time, I picked up. "Hello, is something wrong?" I asked. She hesitated for a moment and then asked, "How's your new life?" Despite her probing tone, I replied cheerfully, "It's great. I love my new apartment and work is going smoothly. I even got promoted and am living freely." "That's good, Michelle. Can you come back home?" she asked. Taken aback, I blurted out, "Why?" "We're struggling financially." I thought to myself I knew it, and responded cautiously, "Francisco's store only makes about $1,000 a month, right?" "You know about that?" she asked. Yes, Francisco's store wasn't doing well. I was fully aware of its financial situation since I handled all the accounting. But he pretended to be the successful owner, without understanding the real state of his business. It was almost laughable how oblivious I handled all the finances and procurement, so of course I sensed her shock. "You knew and didn't tell us." "We had no idea you were doing so well in such a big company, or that you were contributing so much to the household expenses," my former mother-in-law exclaimed. I admitted, yes, I contributed more than $3,000 every month. Thanks to that, you all managed. The truth was I used my salary to bridge the gap in Francisco's business losses. He seemed completely unaware of the situation, and after I left, it seemed reality hit hard. "Michelle, can you please come back?" she asked. Curious, I inquired, "So, how's Francisco's store doing now?" She sighed, "We might have to close soon, and the part-time workers keep quitting." With an inward smirk, I commented on his slightly sloppy management style. It's hard to keep it going for long, isn't it? His little bit of pride doesn't help, not doing proper work. I mean, how many women out there do you think would be willing to support a guy like that? My former mother-in-law was momentarily at a loss for words. I continued somewhat sarcastically, "Wait, I'm a bit busy now since you left. The house is a mess, it's chaotic with things everywhere." Confused, I asked, "Wait, what do you mean?" She described the disarray of their home, with belongings scattered everywhere, looking like a storeroom. Without anyone to cook, they were eating out, which was costing a lot. The washing machine broke down, and it seemed like there's no room in the budget to buy a new one. "Actually, the appliances that you took back, I was really relying on them," my former mother-in-law admitted. Puzzled, I asked, "Huh? Why is that?" "Those were for my convenience. Besides, I bought them myself, so it's okay for me to take them back, right?" She reluctantly agreed, "Yeah, I guess so. But I never realized housework was this challenging." With a firm tone, my former mother-in-law added, "With 3 adults in the house, how can it be that hard? What are friends Isco and your daughter doing?" A hint of fatigue could be heard in her voice. As for Francisco, his staff members have been quitting and sales have plummeted. As soon as he found out, he became really downcast and has just been lazing around at home. But Francisco used to spend his money from the store without any restraint, right? On top of that, Mia doesn't help at all. She doesn't do anything around the house and even gets her allowance. To be honest, living on just my pension for the three of us is really hard, she continued. I responded with a hint of sarcasm. Mia once told me that I was unnecessary because she was there. My former mother-in-law desperately said, Michelle, we're really in trouble. Living on just my pension for the three of us is quite tough. Firmly, I stated, I have no intention of returning to that house. It must be hard living with all that baggage. She seemed to be at a loss for words. Seeing her like this made me feel a bit sorry for her. But as I was about to hang up, my former mother-in-law seemed eager to say something. Michelle, I'm really sorry. Can you reconsider? Her voice sounded a bit exhausted. I replied, I wonder if we can ever spend days together with smiles again. Was it that hard without me? I asked with a mix of surprise and calmness. After a short pause, my former mother-in-law took a deep breath. Yes, there's actually an issue with the property tax. We might have to let go of the house. I see, but I really don't want to get involved anymore. Decide what you're going to do with your family. I hung up without waiting for her next words. After that, I set it up so I wouldn't receive any more calls from her. In my room, holding my favorite mug filled with aromatic coffee, I enjoyed my time alone, looking at the outside scenery. A smile spontaneously appeared on my face. A few months later, when I passed by the cafe where Francisco used to work, I noticed the place was now quiet and empty. Recalling its past liveliness, I felt a bit nostalgic. It seems they really closed the shop. While walking around the old town, I became curious about my former in-law's house and saw a sold sign. Coincidentally, I bumped into an old neighbor in town. According to her, those three had quickly sold their house and moved to a small apartment nearby. In their new home, there were always loud arguments and even the smell of garbage. It seems the neighbors are quite bothered, and it has become a bit of local gossip. I thought it must be tough for them, but with a bit of effort, life can change. I wondered why they don't try as I gazed at the old house. These thoughts wandered in my mind. A lot has happened to me since then, but I'm living each day to the fullest. In fact, a handsome guy from my workplace confessed, saying, I really admire your hardworking nature. Now, we're enjoying our dates, and I'm really looking forward to what the future holds. If I get married again, I really want to be happy. I'm feeling very excited about it now.